In the late 70s, screenwriter Dan O'Bannon wanted to make an alien film. He had already cut his teeth with one of his first projects, an independent student film he did with USC film school friend John Carpenter called Dark Star. But that film was a comedy that derived its humor from the cheap special effects. O'Bannon wanted to expand on this idea and make an actual scary movie where the alien looked real. During a trip to Paris to supervise special effects for Alejandro Jodorowsky's aborted film adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune, O'Bannon found himself inspired by the European sci-fi artists such as Moebius and H.R. Giger. Sadly, after the Jodorowsky project collapsed, O'Bannon found himself broke and homeless upon his return to LA. While he couch surfed with fellow screenwriter Ronald Shusett, O'Bannon penned the script for his Alien movie, drawing inspiration from the sci-fi films he grew up with like The Thing from Another World and Forbidden Planet. He crafted a story of a small crew of astronauts alone on a ship that is drifting in space, each of them picked off one by a creature that has infiltrated their ship, a monstrous creature, not of this earth. O'Bannon and Shusett pitched the idea as Jaws in space, and it wasn't before long until they found their studio. 20th Century Fox, fresh off the success of the little movie they produced called Star Wars, were looking to follow up that success with a sci-fi blockbuster to release in the summer. And since O'Bannon's script was the only spaceship movie on their desk, they had no choice but to greenlight it. Fox assigned then newcomer director Ridley Scott to direct the film. Scott ended up being the right choice as he was keen on emphasizing the horror of O'Bannon's screenplay, describing the film as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in space. After 14 weeks of filming and 20 more weeks of post-production, the film was released on May 25, 1979, under the title Alien. Alien was an instant commercial success, being the 6th highest grossing movie that year, and while initial critical reception was mixed, it did win the Oscar for Best Visual Effects the next year, and H.R. Giger's design for the titular alien helped bring the genre of sci-fi out of the B-movie era and into one defined by creeping, visceral horror, also inadvertently being the starting pistol for numerous ripoffs made in its wake. 3 years later, another movie was released. O'Bannon's old friend John Carpenter, now a successful director in his own right thanks to his contributions to the nascent slasher genre, was approached to do a remake of the Howard Hawks film The Thing from Another World. That remake would become 1982's The Thing, which would take the alien concept of a group of people isolated in a remote area being picked off by an alien creature and adding the element of paranoia to it. Since the creature can assume the form of anything and anyone, the seeds of distrust are planted, and allies are forced to turn against each other, since anybody could be the Thing, whether they know it or not.
You were the only one that could have got to that blood. We'll do you last.
Unlike Alien, The Thing was a critical and commercial failure at the time, owing to the oversaturation of sci-fi movies and audiences not jiving with its nihilistic narrative compared to its more optimistic contemporary E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Time, however, has been very kind to this movie, and nowadays The Thing is regarded as both one of Carpenter's best and a seminal work of 80s horror. So why do I bring these movies up? Because without them, today's anime would not have come into being.
KYOTO video.
Welcome to the 23rd century. Humanity has broken its surly bonds to Earth, and businesses are now making a killing on mining distant planets for their resources. But since this is still the world of business, mining rights need to be secured by sending surveyors to the planets they wish to exploit. The deep space cruiser Solidus, led by veteran Captain Mike Hamilton, has been enlisted by the Syncam Corporation to survey and claim a planet for the latest mining operation. Along with Hamilton and his crew, the Solidus will also be carrying Sincam's representatives, which include Jiro Takagi of the Japanese division, Dick Barry of the Australian division, and the daughter of Sincam's president, Nancy, who has brought her cat Lily along with her.
Don't tell me you're bringing it into Deep Sleep with you.
Of course, like I'm gonna leave her at home for 20 years? If I don't bring her with me, I'll never see her again.
Oh yeah, and she'll be real practical to have around for all those space mice.
Due to the rules of space travel, the passengers and crew have to go into hypersleep for 20 years to reach their destination, only aging 1 month in the process. But as they commence their long sleep to their destination, the ship's computer collects a sample from a piece of space debris flying towards the ship. That sample is actually space bacteria, and it soon finds its way into the ship's air duct. When the passengers and crew wake up 2 decades later, Hamilton checks his voicemail and finds a message from Sincam. They say among their passengers are 2 unaccounted for imposters. Unfortunately, the rest of the tape gets erased before their identities could be revealed. Bigger problems soon arise as passengers and crew alike start dropping dead from a mysterious bacterial infection that infects and kills their host instantly before dissolving their bodies, leaving their clothes behind and fully intact. What is the mysterious bacteria? Who are the imposters on the ship? And why is there another Lily roaming the ship when the original is asleep in their pod?
There you are!
In the golden age of OVAs, anime that ripped off Alien were quite commonplace, but out of all of them, none of them ripped off with such style and finesse as 1987's Lily Cats. Lily Cat is top-notch Halloween material, because unlike Golf Force where the alien stuff is only a small part of the larger narrative and Root Search where the alien stuff is just crap, Lily Cat embraces the films of Scott and Carpenter as its inspiration and pulls off its own unique spin on it. It's not just Alien the anime, but it takes that concept and turns it into a different breed of cats, so to speak. What do I mean by that? Well, come on, cats, you know the drill. Assholes and elbows.
What in blazes is happening?
Frustratingly, I could not find any stories about the production of Lily Cat. That's always the risk when you make videos about a subject where translated production stories are not always plentiful. Doubly true when it's a wholly original story and not an adaptation based off of an existing manga. So to supplement this section of the video, I'm going to talk about how conditions got favorable for an anime like Lily Cat to come into being. Horror and science fiction have always been close bedfellows of genre fiction. Heck, what is widely considered the first science fiction story is also a horror story. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is ostensibly about a learned man, Victor Frankenstein, trying to create life through a scientific experiment. But to his horror, the creature he creates is far more in control than he appears, a living reminder of delving too far into God's domain. Thus, not only was science fiction born, but also the subgenre of science fiction horror. However, science fiction horror mostly went dormant for the rest of the 19th century. It only re-emerged at the start of the 20th century, usually in the form of Lovecraft's cosmic horror or H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. But Lovecraft was more horror than science fiction, and Wells was more science fiction than horror. To achieve balance, there had to have been some outside event where man's scientific advancement ends up being the impetus for fear of global annihilation.
We live in a strange and wondrous time. The Atomic Age.
The Atomic Age brought a new wave of science fiction horror, not in literature, but in the comparatively new medium of film, probing man's relationship with science and newfound discoveries like nuclear energy and space exploration and the possible consequences they would face.
Mad, rampant, wrought its most awesome creation. For born in that swirling inferno of radioactive dust were things so horrible, so terrifying, so hideous.
In fact, it was the country that bore the brunt of the Atomic Age, Japan, that created the landmark film of this subgenre. Science fiction was a massive genre for Japan in the post-war era. Their society had seen firsthand the great and terrible power that scientific advancement wrought, and put the horror into a form known the world over. But as the atomic age began to fade, so did horror from science fiction. And while there were still traditional films of that genre from time to time, the 60s and 70s in Japan took more optimistic approaches to science fiction, seeing it as a force for good instead of evil. Even Godzilla became a hero by the end of it. Outside of Japan, science fiction horror was desperate to escape high-concept horrors like aliens and giant monsters. The horrors became less about creatures and men from Mars, and more about dystopian societies or artificial intelligence. Then George Lucas made a space samurai film, and all hell broke loose. Star Wars didn't just help pave the way for Fox greenlighting Alien in the first place, nor did it also inspire Ridley Scott to take on the project in a fit of directorial jealousy, but it also paved the way for the introduction of the global box office, which would have a profound effect on Japanese creators. By the beginning of the 80s, the new class of anime creators were emerging, people inspired by the anime, manga, and science fiction stories that came before them. But on top of that, they were also inspired by American blockbuster film. The 1980s is a very Hollywood time for anime, and that is reflected in the part of the industry where animators could get away with the most, the OVA industry. And this is where an anime like Lilycat comes into being. Looking at who's in charge, one gets the feeling that Victor Entertainment were expecting great things from Lilycat. Specifically, it could have been them trying to make lightning strike twice by trying to replicate the success of the science fiction anime that kicked off the OVA craze, Dallos. Not just enlisting in the help of animation studio Pierrot, but also the creator of Dallos, Hisayuki Toriumi, was also enlisted as both creator and director of Lilycat. The big names did not stop there. Animation director was Toshiyasu Okada, who was also the chief animator and character designer for Toriumi's Dallos and its previous project, Area 88. For screenplay, you had Gundam legend Hiroyuki Hoshiyama. For mechanical design, you had future mech designer mainstay Yasuhiro Moriki. For character design, you had rising star Yasuomi Umetsu. And for monster design, you had Yoshitaka Amano. Yeah, Final Fantasy and Vampire Hunter D's Yoshitaka Amano. It should be clear that this was a true blockbuster OVA, especially with a stacked crew like that ready to assemble it. And the result of their project is a near perfect specimen. So without further ado, let's talk about what first? Band? What do you mean band? Okay, I guess I gotta do this. So lately it seems like this movie has gotten some attention in the anime community because there's been talk going around saying that it was banned in the USA for being too violent. That there's a far gorier uncut version out there, and the cut that Streamline released in 1995 and is now licensed by Discotek is actually a censored and thus inferior version of the film. Now, I don't want to call out anyone directly, and I could be missing something here, but I am 100% sure that piece of trivia is complete bull. I think the only reason such a rumor got started was because Streamline Pictures was Carl Masick's company, and he already had a reputation for Americanizing dubs for mass appeal. A claim that, while true, was nevertheless exaggerated by smelly nerds on the internet. And that censored cut of Lilycat does exist, but that cut was solely for TV broadcast when the anime got licensed to be aired on the Sci-Fi channel in the 90s. You know, like all gory horror movies had to do in order to meet broadcast standards.
Lilycat, next on the Sci-Fi channel.
So there's your answer. Lilycat's status as a banned anime is barely a half-truth. Maybe somebody can prove me wrong, but I'm pretty sure the copy that has the violent cat death in it is the uncut version. Oh, content warning, by the way. Now, enough playground rumors. Let's talk about the anime itself. A little forewarning before we go on. Like the films that inspired it, there are indeed a lot of twists and turns in Lilycat, and I will be revealing all of them over the course of this video for the sake of illustrating my points better. So if you still want to go into Lilycat blind, I would suggest getting off at this station. From this point onward, I speak without a spoiler warning.
How about you? What's it gonna be?
One of the first things about Lilycat that makes it worth checking out is that it is a product of the bubble era economy. Being that this is a traditional sci-fi horror with nary a giant robot to be found, there really was no need for Victor and Pierrot to go all out. After all, horror anime does not always need big budgets to be terrifying. Of course, it doesn't hurt in some cases. But this is the 80s, fellas. Animators have the time and money to be excessive, and excessive they will be. If you thought Biohunter had impressive body horror Sakuga, Lilycat steps up the game. This is inspired by The Thing after all, so you get to see excellently horrifying animation of victims' bodies swelling up and expanding as they are violently expelled into the cold vacuum of space, or Nancy coming face to face with a monster in the form of her colleague Dorothy as her face splits open, revealing the screaming face of her cat Lily. But what's more impressive is the little bits of animation. They are able to dress up exposition scenes by having the characters do intricate step-by-step actions such as prepping their weaponry for the upcoming encounter with the monster. Toriumi is also willing to let scenes linger, having characters perform their actions in silence. It builds tension and makes us feel like we're the alien bacteria leering at their prospective victims. It's that devotion to tension that allows for shots like this shot, animated solely by Toyoaki Amura, a first-person viewpoint of a character slowly walking down the hallway to their unknown doom. And as far as I know, this was done solely on pencil, paper, and painted cells. No computers involved. The true animation MVPs of Lilycat, however, are Yasumi Umetsu and Yoshitaka Amano for their designs. Umetsu's character designs are one of a kind for the world of anime. Adding to the B-movie feel of Lilycat, his characters are drawn to look more like characterized versions of screen actors. There's an obvious Hollywood influence to Umetsu's design, which is not surprising considering his later works. And he even uses this influence as a way to play with the audience's expectations. The character of Morgan W. Scott is obviously designed to look like a stereotypical gun-toting American action hero. Muscular, cocky, blonde, and always talking shit.
What I'm interested in is the money, special mission pay.
Risk bonuses?
Now you're singing my song.
So, of course, the audience would end up being caught off guard when they see that he's the first to die. Anticlimactically, a bacterial infection, and off-screen no less. And Amano's designs for the alien bacteria, for as little as we see it, is downright something out of your nightmares. An ever-changing amorphous blob of shark teeth and tentacles with the screaming faces of the numerous victims embedded in its flesh. Hell, the first time we get a good look at Amano's monster, it's still in the process of digesting 2 of its most recent victims. Audio-wise, it's a hotbed for some of the big-name seiyuu of the 80s, with names like Chikao Otsuka, Teisho Genda, and Masako Katsuki among others in the credits.
惑星探査に猫が何の役に立つのかね。
その変なおもちゃよりマシなんじゃない？
え？これか？いるかもしれねえぜ。エイリアンがよ。
The streamlined dub is also not that bad. If anything, the dub also adds to the B-movie quality of the production. Whether or not that's a point in its favor is up to you. Performances of note include Mike Reynolds as Captain Hamilton, who really sells the long-in-the-tooth veteran Captain of the Stars role well.
Just keep your blood pressure down because they're the employees of the mother company and we're here to assist them on their mission. Don't get bent out of shape. We're interplanetary taxi drivers and everybody else is just along for the ride.
And you'll never believe this, but Bob Bergen plays our youthful co-protagonist, Hiro. I know he does a good job because I can't believe that's the voice of Porky Pig being in an anime.
She was checking the pathology of her lungs with the X-ray scanner by herself.
How'd you figure that out?
It wasn't tough. Because someone had done the same thing in here.
You mean besides you, eh?
If there is one actor who is laying it on a bit thick though, it's Gregory Snegoff as Dick Barry. By having him play a crusty old Australian, he is taking whole kilometers out of the centimeters given to him, and it borders on cartoonish at times.
I'll help you to realize we're not in a bleeding picnic here. You come straight back after you found her, and next time put a string on so you stop losing it. You hear what I'm saying? Otherwise, I'll put one round her neck.
Get on, mate. Wallabies, koalas, petrels, Bob's your Uncle Midnight Oil, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, Bluey. I bring up the B-movie comparisons because the overall narrative of Lilycat is the product of a generation of anime creators really hooked on Hollywood movies. It's not only wearing the influences of Alien and The Thing on its sleeves, but it's also chock full of the blockbuster cliches of the time. Captain Hamilton inadvertently signs his own death warrant by having one of his first lines in the film be about how this is his last voyage before retirement.
Not thinking of retiring, are you?
Yep. As a famous comic book character once said, I'm getting too old for this kind of shit.
We gotta give these guys credit though. Toriumi and Hoshiyama are well versed in writing sci-fi stories, so they do add some nice elements that make their version of the Alien Things style film their own. For one thing, it's a pretty hard sci-fi story with realistic outcomes. The reason why the alien bacteria isn't picked up as a monster invasion first is because the first victim's deaths are all too similar to Legionnaire's disease, which is a real disease and is given a Kojima-style explanation for it in the middle of the film.
Some veterans were at a convention. 12 hours later, they began dropping like flies for no reason. Their lungs were filled with bacteria which caused them all to suffocate.
There's also the realistic outcome that comes with manned deep space travel and cryostasis needed to make that possible. Not only does it make the crew situation feel even more isolated, but it also gives a new perspective on the outcome of taking a 40+ year journey and only aging 2 months in that time.
I was so excited by my first voyage. I got back to Earth and met my son, who I'd left as a baby. He'd grown into a man older than I was. I can't catch up with the new age, new science, new theories, a flood of new information. People treated me like a living fossil, and I realized I'm an anachronism, not quite useless, but annoying to have around. So I escaped back into space and returned to a different new age.
This also ends up being the reason why imposters are on board this ship in the first place, because they'll be off-world for 4 decades, which means the statute of limitations of any crime they committed beforehand will have expired by the time they get back, and they can go scot-free.
Once in a while, these guys fake their way onto a starship so they can spend 40 or 50 years hibernating in space without getting much older. When they get back to Earth, no one's around anymore to remember their crime.
The imposter element is also a source of tension. While Hamilton's not too worried about him, seeing the situation as more of a nuisance if anything, he does follow protocol and orders all the files of the passengers to be opened with full interviews to find any discrepancies in their stories. This causes a lot of dirty laundry to be aired out, and suspicion runs high as a result.
I can remember perfectly what happened. It wasn't me, it was one of the guys in my class with me, Jimmy Hangle. I can't believe they still have it on the records like that. Jimmy Hangle was arrested for drugs in high school, not me. They were always mixing up the two of us, calling me Hangle and him Mangle. It was terrible!
Do you expect us to believe an excuse like that, Jimmy?
But it ends up working in the end, since that's what susses out the two imposters, Hero and Dick Barry.
Medical man, eh?
It's a hobby.
Now that's funny. Something just doesn't seem right. Maybe it's because company data have Mr. Hiro Takagi specialized in space engineering and not medicine. I guess they must have gotten things all backwards.
And even then, that distrust never goes away, because it turns out that Hiro is a wanted criminal and Dick Barry is an undercover detective who wants to track him down and bring him in by any means necessary. Right down to putting him in handcuffs, which he must stay in for the remainder of the film. And of course, all of the above elements make the presence of an alien monster that can take the form of any life form it absorbs all the more unwelcome. The drama of Lilycat reaches its fever pitch when the big twist of the anime is revealed, however. It turns out that this mission was never meant to be a surveying mission at all. The real mission was to collect the alien bacteria for study at a later date. They find out by discovering that the Solidus computer is no longer flying the ship.
Who's driving? Oh my god, Cat's driving!
A robotic replica of Nancy's pet cat Lily has assumed direct control of the ship and is carrying out Sincam's will. The only reason why Nancy was let on this mission in the first place was because her Lilycat would provide excellent cover for Sincam's Lilycats, aka computerized animal-shaped technology, robots. As for everyone else on the ship, their lives are completely expendable. They may as well have just been living bait for the bacteria, if even that. They were simply a means to an end. This reveal ends up making a conversation Sincam worker Jimmy has with Captain Hamilton all the more tragic.
My manager recommended me for the very first time. Maybe he thought I was the best man for the job because I was spending a lot of lonely weekends. You know, putting in extra hours at work.
Yeah, it's the same twist in Alien, but as far as we know, Sincam doesn't want to go the Weyland-Yutani route of weaponizing the uncontrollable bioweapon. At least as far as we know. So Lilycat is a pretty damn good knockoff of the films it inspired. Well animated, intense, and adding its own twist on things. However, it does not in any way surpass those films, nor can it be seen as an equal to them either. Hey, remember, I said it was near perfect. Near perfect. Lilycat does a lot of things right, but it can't help but be constrained by the format it exists in. If this was a full-length movie, it could have had the time to better develop a lot of the ideas it wished to present. But since it's a 60-minute OVA film, a lot of the story ideas it has are not used to their full potential. For one, the paranoia angle that you would expect from a movie taking inspiration from The Thing is sorely underdeveloped. It has all the setup for good paranoia, people not being who they say they are, everyone's dark secrets leaking out in the open for everyone to see, the alien bacteria absorbing and assimilating everyone to replicate their bodies, and there's very little payoff to that. The monster only transforms into one of its victims once for a scare, and the whole paranoia about nobody being what they say they are feels half-baked because we only get 2 secrets out before the imposters are found. And after that, most of the intra-character tension comes in the form of a chained heat scenario.
But as of this moment, I'm still alive. And so is this murdering bastard. And as long as I'm alive, it's my responsibility to get him back to Earth for trial.
Not only does it temper any potential rising pressure for the scares, but it also causes some of the characters to feel underwritten, in particular the female cast. Carolyn's always Captain Hamilton's Uhura before she bites it off screen, Dorothy gets some drama concerning an out-of-wedlock pregnancy before also getting to learn about the powerhouse of the cell, and Nancy, despite being the president's daughter and an important link to the film's biggest plot development, never evolves past being the damsel in distress that emerging main character Hero has to rescue in the end.
I can't put up with it anymore. I can't. I'm gonna go crazy.
You would think that maybe she would have a scene to really parse the events that happen in the story, see how she reacts to learning that her own father was merely using her as a pawn for a company's secret mission, a CEO who would sacrifice his own flesh and blood for a risky venture in science. But alas, her only defining traits seem to be looking scared and cribbing her looks from Earthbound's Paula. And for the characters that do get development, in this case Hero and Dick Barry, Hoshiyama pulls a lot of punches with them. It turns out the reason why Hero is a criminal on the lam is because of the crime of murder.
Very good, Mr. Detective. Your patience has been rewarded. You found the mad gunman who murdered those 3 men on King Street. I figured I was safe hiding on a starship for 40 years. I never thought you'd be willing to tell me quite this far.
But then the first punch gets pulled by having Hero's crime be that he murdered a group of drug-dealing lowlives because they were the ones who got his sister hooked on the good stuff that eventually killed her.
I barely recognized her when I saw her again. And you know where that was, Nancy? Prostituting for a King Street pimp.
That's terrible. Is she alright?
She's dead.
Dick Barry pops up by saying that the reason why he is so devoted to tracking down and bringing Hero in is because Hero's actions ruined his investigation and prevented a larger crime ring from being brought in.
You had no right to kill them. We were on their tracks for months, and if we'd only been able to arrest them, we could have split their drug ring, closed down that prostitution operation, and that'd have been the end of them.
So Hero's actions did more harm than good in the macro scale. That is, until the second punch gets pulled by Dick Barry being angrier that he was denied a promotion over the loss of his case, rather than a gang of crooks getting away. His motives are entirely selfish, so that just paints Hero in a more favorable light. I guess that has to happen because Hero and Nancy are the sole survivors after Dick Barry succumbs to the alien infection, and Captain Hamilton sacrifices himself by self-destructing the ship, killing both the alien and Lilycat in the process. But those decisions keep Lilycat at the quality level of a good anime, when it could have been a great anime. But even if it lacks a lot of the intricacies that make the films it's cribbing from such classics, Lilycat still manages to succeed as a scary sci-fi horror film at a basic level. It's got great visceral monster design, direction that preys on the viewer's paranoia, and the finest examples of animation excess a healthy anime industry has to offer. If that's all you need, then Lilycat is essential All Hallows Night viewing material. And with that, I wish you all a very safe and special Halloween. And be careful of any cats that cross your path. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video or want to support this channel, please donate to my Patreon. Each dollar can give you early access to my videos as they come out, as well as keep the channel running a bit more smoothly. You can also subscribe to the channel, ring that bell for notifications, or just like this video. Either way, you'll be helping me out. That's all for now. See you for the next round of tapes.